Hello, Dave. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I really am. I'm excited for some more nerding out on paleo and deep time.
I gotta say, I'm really enjoying nerding out with all our guests and having fun. I look forward to it every time, and I am
Yeah,
learning a lot as we go along.
yeah, me too. And it's crazy considering we're not scientists, but we have the top of the PhD pile talking to us and treating us as, I don't know if they treat us like equals, but maybe subpar nerds,
I think
fellow paleo nerds.
they treat us like a ventriloquist and an artist should be treated, huh? I don't know. But yeah, they put up with us. It's cool. But we can talk the lingo enough with them, We get
Yeah,
by. We get by.
yeah. So it's late summer in Ketchikan there, and there's been no cruise ships. It's been void of tourists. So what's it like? You said you had tons of rain this season?
It has been unrelenting. There have been maybe, I don't know, maybe a week of sunshine that we've had all summer long. If all told, it is overcast today. It's been raining, but I am thrilled that the humpies and the dog salmon are in the creek in force, and the spawning party is going on. They are going up the waterfall and watching them go into the fish ladder. The newly functioning fish ladder has been
Wait, you had
fixed.
something to do. Didn't you help design that or
Well,
suggest
no,
it
no,
to
no.
the?
I just was bugging the city folks. It'd be kind of cool if this was redone. And actually, they had some money for some head tax money to improve it.
Oh, you
There's a
mean there
new,
was an old fish ladder?
yeah, but it hasn't really been operating for the last, I don't know, 20 years. Tourists would come by the shop. They say, "Where's the fish ladder?" And I'd point them up the way there and say, "Well, it's not really working, but go look at the concrete."
Now, I've got a question about fish ladders. I know they were incorporated back in the great dam building era of the United States in the 30s when we dammed all our rivers
Yeah.
to allow spawning fish to go upstream past the dam. But is there any history before that? Did the Native Americans use fish ladders? I know they had fish traps.
They had fish traps, but I cannot say with any, I do not know. I just do not know.
Oh,
So
wait,
I will,
is there a dam there in Ketchikan?
there's not a dam.
Well, why do you have a fish ladder?
Well, it's, it's for the lazier fish. And actually, maybe we're messing with evolution, but it just got a little boost for it. But actually, it's a raging, when it's been raining so much, it's just raging water all the time. And, it kind of helps them a little bit. So this is augmenting it. So this is for the, the
Yeah, but
laid
wait a
back.
minute.
Actually,
These fish were here for a million years before humans were ever building fish ladders. So this is really a tourist thing then?
well, maybe it was just some guys that, I don't know, had too much time in their hands, and then maybe we are messing with the hand of nature when we shouldn't be. But, I was thinking what's really cool about this whole thing and the fish here in the creek is that this town was built around that creek, that particular creek. The only reason for this town to be here is because of the fish creek. And it was not actually a permanent settlement here with the Tlingit Native Americans that were here and are still here.
It was
It
seasonal
was
in the
seasonal. It
salmon.
was a fish, yeah, just one of the streams that they would the Tongass tribe in particular would work. And but what is phenomenal is that these fish show up pretty much the same week every year after century, thousands and thousands of years. You can set your watch by them, and here they are. And it's if anything, it's just that magical journey that these creatures make, kind of give me hope for the future, man.
These fish, is there any kind of a counter or an electric eye? I mean, do you have any technology that says so many hundred fish go by per hour, or does someone count them? Do you have any idea?
There are many salmon streams in Alaska that do have people that actually count, and there are counters, but this is basically just another creek. There are thousands upon
So
thousands
how
of
many
creeks.
fish would come up in a week? 1,000, 10,000?
It's another case of, I don't know. It looks like there's a couple thousand at least in the creek right now.
And I've seen that little tiny park up there where the fish kind of do their spawn. It's kind of a man-made park up there in
Oh, yeah, City
yeah.
Park.
But it's tiny. That place is absolutely tiny. So how do 1,000 fish get up there?
Well, that's just a little offshoot, and actually the fish party, the sex party is happening, out in the gravel off of that. So it's just this massive orgy going on. There's love in the air. It's magical, man. So it's really cool.
There's milt in the air.
There it is. And it sort of reminds me of that T-shirt that I see that you're wearing today. Spawn till you die.
Yeah, that was not on purpose.
Thank you.
For you listeners who have not seen Ray's Spawn Till You Die t-shirt, it's pretty iconic.
Yeah.
It's a pirate skull, and the crossbones are salmon. And people have worn this all over the world. It's kind of appeared in pop culture, in films and print. And it pretty much means do the nasty until your life is over.
Well, yeah, I guess it does, Dave. They just boil it down to, but I prefer...
It's a fish. It's a fish worship. You're worshiping fish.
That's right. Well, anyways, like I said, this is a fish-centric town, and I draw a fish.
Well, I love it, and I'm very disappointed. Again, I have not been able to make it this year because of the zombie pandemic, but hopefully soon. Now, I wanted to switch into some paleo news. I'm sure you've read about this. And it's crazy how journalists report these things, and then that's the same headline I see. Crocodile that eats dinosaurs with teeth like the size of bananas. Have you seen this headline?
No, but there are a lot of crocodiles. There's Sarcosuchus, Dinosuchus, all those big sucuses. There's a new one?
The idea that these teeth are the size of bananas, all right, that's the thickness, and that's pretty damn big. But when you look deeper into this article, they have only recovered probably maybe 1/20th of the front of the jaw, and there are no teeth. There's just teeth sockets. And so paleontologists, through comparative anatomy, through other specimens, are able to discern the size, the weight, the size of the teeth, and that's what blows me away about how amazing paleontology is. Through such rare and tiny remains, they can draw an entire living creature and be pretty damn correct about it.
Pretty darn correct about it. Yeah, you've got to do comparative anatomy. You've got to, scale things up. You have to extrapolate a lot of information from the size of scraps of things.
So as a paleo artist, Ray, the question is to you, have you ever been given a modicum, a very small amount of bones, and then drew it, and then later on they find out, oh, it didn't look like that?
Well, we have touched on this a few times, the giant spike-tooth salmon. And I have personally been involved in extrapolating out the size of that beast because I've talked to some scientists and said, hey, I saw vertebrae that were almost 3 inches across. That's got to be the size of a marlin. Am I right? Can I extrapolate that out? So I actually work with a scientist at the University of Michigan, Dr. Jerry Smith, who's he is the freshwater fish paleo guy for the planet. He's one of the leading guys. And he worked out, showed me the math that he did. You can't just say, just because the vertebrae is this small and this animal and it's this big, you got to extrapolate out, because there are things that happen as you get larger.
Right.
You work with gravity. So it's not just the simple math, it's 3 times as big. But he conservatively put it at about 8 to 10 feet. But his first estimates were like 12 to 14 feet, which I thought were pretty cool. Yeah. I got excited about that. But he dialed it back.
But your misplacement of the teeth is a very minor mistake. It's not like you drew it with feathers and then you find out, oh no, it's a fish with scales. I'm talking about, have you ever had a massive mistake from a very, very little scant evidence in the beginning, and then later on to find out that it looks nothing like what you drew?
Well, I live in fear
of the future.
Of the future, because... speaking of feathers, man, the feathered dinosaur thing, I grew up with scaly dinosaurs. Yeah. And I've been drawing my Triceratops and my T-Rex all these years.
Well, our guest Gary Staw built a T-Rex that was covered in beautiful chicky
proto-feathers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a big question.
But that leads us to our guest today.
You got it, man.
Oh, dude.
Exactly.
All right. She is awesome and amazing. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes. Jingmai O'Connor. Jingmai, and I am so thrilled. I've never met her, man, but she's got a reputation as being really cutting edge scientist, and she got a lot of street cred. She's just cool all around. We'll dive right in and we'll nerd out. We'll go way deep because she knows more about feathered dinosaurs than anyone else on the planet, I'm betting. Or she's at least up there in that league. So let's call her up, Dave.
All right.
Jingmai O'Connor in Pasadena, California, I believe, right?
Yes, currently, but not for long.
Yeah, I want to get into that. You are about to go to some most amazing new job somewhere in the Midwest?
Yeah, so after 11 years being an expat living in Beijing, China, which is where I would normally be right now if it wasn't for this damn pandemic, I got a job stateside, so I'll be like making my glorious return, and I'll be starting at the Field Museum in Chicago as their fossil reptile curator or associate curator, but
wow.
I'll take it.
So you get to play with Sue, the Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to see Sue, like they have to like come through me, and I'm still like kind of blown away by that. I also need to learn everything there is to learn about Sue before I start my job.
Yeah.
So
Have you seen that new sculpture they have of Sue, the life size with a dinosaur in its mouth, with a prey in its mouth?
Yeah, I saw that. You do not want to know how much that thing cost. But yeah, I've seen pictures of it, and I don't know. I have to admit, I like the skeleton version better, but that's just me.
I hear you.
Yeah, you guys like your bones. So how did you become a paleo nerd? What started it for you?
So unlike most paleo nerds, I came to the scene very late. So, when I was young, I had no real strong interests. I kind of jumped from possible career to possible career. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And then my mom went back to grad school to do a PhD in geology when I was like 8. So I got immersed in geology and decided I wanted to be a geologist, pretty much just because I wanted to please my mom. And also I think if you know a lot about something, it makes you confident. So you tend to like these things more. So I knew a lot about geology. So anyways, I went to Occidental College, the only declared freshman geology major, and with no idea what I wanted to study within geology.
So you went there by accident?
Yeah, they gave me the best financial aid package, but then... Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
By accident, yeah. My dad loved to tell me I was an oxymoron. He never got sick of that joke for the whole 3 years I was there.
That's a good one.
But it really worked out because there's this guy, Donald Prothero, who I think people is fairly well known in paleontology circles. He's an extremely prolific writer. He writes also a lot of textbooks. So anyways, he was my advisor simply because of the way they break up the students by their last names. So he's my advisor. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be a volcanologist. Like volcanoes are cool. I mean, I was just choosing something out of a hat, And, but then I took his class, historical geology, which, basically takes you from the Big Bang all the way up to present day Earth. And of course, as part of that tale, there's the evolution of life. And, so, I just got totally hooked on evolution from that class. And I told him immediately, I want to be a paleontologist. And he was like, well, maybe you should wait until you take paleontology first. So next semester I took paleontology and I'm like, yeah. Still want to do it. I didn't even wait till the class was over. 3 weeks in, I was like, yep, still want to do this. And, he was like, don't do it. It's a very tough profession. It's highly competitive. It's thankless. He really tried to dissuade me. But my response was I'm going to do what my mom did. She taught me to follow her passion because she was originally going to go back to school for something else, a quick and dirty social science degree to just become a social worker and, get easy money basically. But then last minute, she was like, no, geology is what I love. I'm going to do geology. So yeah, I learned that lesson from her to do what you love. That's more important than anything else.
Well, usually when people tell you not to do something, you want to do it even more.
Yeah, maybe there was a little bit of that in there, but yeah, at the time it was really I don't care about money. I want to do what I'm passionate about. And, there's been one or two brief moments where I'm I sure do care about money right now. But, for the most part, I'm really happy with my choice. I've also been one of the very lucky students to actually survive. For every, the thousands of paleo students there are out there, there's a couple hundred jobs, so it's a very low success rate. So I've been really, really, really lucky. And But also, I think part of that is because I took this leap and I went to China where there's just amazing fossils. And, you don't know how many people I've told to come to China. Like, they're like, oh, I can't get a job wherever I am. Like, paleo, it's so hard. And I'm like, come to China. There's tons of projects that I could work with you on with your expertise.
Jingmai, actually, so you were in Don's class, Don Prothero's classes. Did you actually get to go out into the field at that time? Did you get a taste for field work, or did you get a taste for field work with your mother when you were growing up?
Yeah. So, we weren't very, we're kind of poor. That's why my mom had to go back to school. So while she was in school, our family vacations were her reconnaissance trips for like field trips that she had to take students on, or if she had to go collect samples for her PhD, like that was the new family vacation. I mean, we always went camping for vacations anyways. So yeah, I got my taste of field work young. And then
in Southern California?
Yeah, but also mostly in Southern California and the deserts there. But also, we would go into Nevada or Arizona. And I mean, my mom never took us. Her PhD study area was in Wyoming, but she never took us that far. She went there by herself. But yeah, I was a little bit of a rock hound. Like if you see in our room, we have like huge glass cases filled with minerals that we all collected them when we were kids. My little brother was obsessed with trilobites, actually. He has a really impressive trilobite collection that I'm super jealous of now. But at the time, I just wasn't interested in fossils. That came much later. But then, yeah, with Don, we also went into the field, and I was a field assistant for him one summer as well. And he took us like all across the United States. And that was a really awesome experience.
So that's really cool that he was such an inspirational professor. How did you make the great turn then to China and birds? Where did that happen?
So, everybody asks, like, why do you end up studying the thing that you end up studying? And it's basically has to do with where you go to grad school, because you apply to all these grad schools. You only get into a select, a portion of them. And then at each one, there are just a few people you can work with. And each person there has their own speciality and their own projects that they would want their student to focus on. Would you work with them? Right. So, basically I had three choices because I got rejected from half my programs. So I could either work with Ryosuke Motani and study marine reptiles, which is actually my true love.
Oh.
Or I could work with, Luis Chiappe, study fossil birds, or with Wang Xiaoming and study mammals. And this is where I did, where my practical side came out. And I thought I was making a practical choice that the best thing for me to be a successful paleontologist would be to work on something that's really new, and there's a lot of new material coming out. So I chose to work on fossil birds with Luis Chiappe. So.
Hey, by the way, Dr. Luis Chiappe is an Argentine paleontologist who is best known for his discovery of the first sauropod nesting sites in the Badlands of Patagonia and for his work on the origin and early evolution of Mesozoic birds. He's currently the head of the Natural History Museum of LA County's Research and Collections Department, and he's one all-around cool paleo guy.
Ray, you know Luis. I think I ate a barbecue in his backyard last year with Kirk Johnson from the Smithsonian.
That's right. Yeah, I braved to bring a ventriloquist to Luis's house. And that was a fun evening. But did you actually work at the LA County Museum of Natural History with Luis and earn your PhD at the same time? How does that work?
So I was at USC. That's like where I formally got my degree. But USC is right across the street from So I had an office at USC, and I had an office in the museum, and I was a graduate student in residence at the museum. Yeah, so that worked out really well. And I had like my skateboard, and I would just ride it in between the two offices. I would even ride my skateboard in the Natural History Museum, which they probably did not like. I mean, I spent most of my time there when I wasn't taking classes or having to TA at USC. It was really awesome being in the museum. It's just such a cool feeling to be this workaholic who shows up at 5 a.m. and nobody's there, and the museum's all dark, and and then you leave when it's like 9 p.m. And again, you can just walk through the exhibits like totally, they're completely empty. Everything's dark. It's just, it's a really cool, I don't know. It's a feeling that I really liked. I love the feeling of being in a natural museum.
And you got to roam the collections also.
Yeah, actually my office was in a corner of the Mesozoic collection room.
Hey, well, let's go deep nerd now, shall we? You are one of the experts on the planet, if not one of the most renowned experts on the planets.
Why, thank you.
On birds and dinosaurs. I want to ask you this. When I look out the window and I see a bird flying by, and I'm talking to the kids too, and I look at the bird and I say, that is a dinosaur. Can I say that with complete confidence?
Yes, definitely. So all birds are dinosaurs, but not all dinosaurs are birds. And it's just as simple as that, right?
Can you walk us through our understanding of birds as dinosaurs from the very first Archaeopteryx and...
Can I go 230 million years ago first?
Okay, go ahead.
The first flying reptiles were pterosaurs, and they evolved in the right after the Triassic extinction at the beginning of the Jurassic. Mm-hmm. So my question, before we get into Mesozoic birds and avian dinosaurs, and
Scansoriopterygians. We said it together. We get to make a wish.
Say it again.
Scansoriopterygian. Right?
Yeah. Before we get to there. So why did pterosaurs evolve flight? Now, they're flying reptiles. They're not birds. They're not related to birds. Why do they evolve flight? And that's almost, 60 million years before birds.
Yeah. So, I mean, why anybody evolves anything, it has to do with the circumstances that animal is living in, right? And honestly, it's really difficult to answer that question. So it must have been an animal living in some niche where some form of like proto-flight was advantageous, which then natural selection eventually produced a form that's capable of full-on powered flight. So yes, there were already flying reptiles in existence, but, to add to this complexity, flight evolved in dinosaurs like 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
So, why did flight evolve so many times when it was already like the aerial niche was already occupied? They would have had to compete with pterosaurs. So it wasn't like there was just this opportunity available to them. And so we really don't understand why flight evolved so many times, why flight evolved in any particular group. I mean, it's a really difficult question to answer.
Well,
better than that.
Doesn't that lead us to the 3 evolutionary potential reasons why flight evolved, which is tree down, ground up?
That's a really primitive way. No offense, sorry, but that's like
I'm a nerd. Correct me, please.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what we were taught when I started grad school. It's like trees down or ground up. But the thing is, like, anytime...
But define that first, though, before we shoot it down.
So before we realized that dinosaurs had evolved flight multiple times, we thought that the idea or like the research question, how did birds evolve from non-avian dinosaurs and how did flight evolve within the Dinosauria? We thought of those as essentially the same question, right? So if you wanted to understand how birds originated, you could understand how flight evolved in dinosaurs. And so there were 2 competing hypotheses, and one was the trees down hypothesis. And this essentially said, evolving flight against gravity is really difficult. So if you're going to evolve flight, it's much easier to just go with gravity, which means that you climb up somewhere high or you gain height in some way, and then you glide downwards, and eventually you evolve powered flight, or you just continue gliding, whatever. So this idea said that small proto-birds, like non-avian dinosaurs most closely related to birds, were small animals that climbed up in trees. They already had feathers on their forelimbs, which evolved for some other reason, may it be insulation or ornamentation, we don't really know. And these feathers on their forelimbs helped them when they were jumping between branches, so they could maybe jump further or, glide a little bit. So this resulted in natural selection selecting for larger feathered surfaces on their forelimbs so that they become, gliders, and eventually they evolve powered flight. So this is important because it hypothesizes that flight evolved through a gliding phase. Powered flight evolved through a gliding phase. And then there's the competing hypothesis, which is called the ground up hypothesis, which is always the one I was taught to follow by Luce Chiappe. And this said, well, hey, if you look at all these small feathered dinosaurs that are supposedly closely related to birds, they're cursorial animals. They live on the ground. So the hypothesis
is that what cursorial means?
Yeah, cursorial means running on the ground. So it's like a terrestrial animal that's spending most of its time in bipedal locomotion on the ground, or quadrupedal, I suppose.
So a squirrel is cursorial if it's not a gliding squirrel.
No, well, a ground squirrel is cursorial, but most squirrels are scansorial. They're climbing. They live in trees, right? Yeah. So you have these like small dinosaurs, like say, at the time it was like Deinonychus, Velociraptor. These were the small bipedal theropod dinosaurs that at the time we knew of that were most closely related to birds. And they're all clearly adapted for running on the ground. So again, you have feathers, short feathers on the forelimb that have evolved from some other reason that we also still don't fully understand. And as this animal's running after prey or trying to escape because it's the prey, the feathers on its forelimbs are helping it to run faster and jump higher. So then again, natural selection produces larger and larger proto-airfoils on the forelimbs. And then eventually these airfoils are so large that the force that they can generate counterbalances like the body weight essentially. And then now once it becomes big enough to counterbalance that weight, you have like excess lift that's produced that then can allow you to fly. So this hypothesis infers that powered flight evolves directly without a intermediate gliding stage, which makes a lot of sense to me because if you look at an animal that glides and then you look at powered flight, they're totally different things. Like if you're gliding, you want to hold your airfoil out taut, right? Your forelimb is not moving. It's not a dynamic form of flight. So how can you go from evolving to have like stiff arms holding out your airfoil and then to having this very complicated flight stroke that we see in birds? So I tend to, at the time, I tended to go more with the ground up hypothesis. But anytime you see a dichotomy, a red light should go off in your mind. Like there's something wrong there because it's never this or that.
Either or, right.
Yes, evolution is so much more complex than that. And natural selection is so much more complex. There's not just one evolutionary pressure that you are experiencing. You're experiencing all these different evolutionary pressures to reproduce, to, feed, to whatever. It's a lot of different things. It's not just one being like, I must fly, I must fly, I must fly, So the newest updated version of, how did birds evolve flight is basically a combination of these two hypotheses, which I think is really neat. So
I know this one.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you're going to get the gold star.
Ontogenetic transitional wing theory, OTW, right?
Oh.
Did I get it?
Very nice.
I've been practicing that.
Excellent. I'm very impressed.
Say that word again, but break it down.
Ontogenetic transitional wing theory.
What does ontogenetic mean?
So ontogeny is basically all the changes you go through, like when from the first cell of your,
it's an evolutionary
development.
change.
No, it's developmental change with age.
It's like when you're in the womb, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So for example, from when you're a baby to when you become an adult, that's ontogeny. Yeah, that's ontogenetic change. Yeah. And then also even your change to senescence, that's also ontogenetic change.
Senescence.
So senescence is when you become old and decrepit.
like
me.
Me.
It's happening. Yeah. I'm such a party animal that it's like happening to me like way too soon. And I'm like, my knees are all chingered and I'm like, oh no. Yeah.
Hey, I'm already there. I'm only actually 32. I mean, look at me. But anyways.
Oh, yeah.
So walk us through this. How is it a little bit of both?
So this hypothesis that basically came from studying some living birds. So they took these little baby birds of a species that is like a primarily cursorial bird. So like, I think they're closely related to quails. They're called chuckers, but whatever. So like a quail-like bird. So when, these babies are precocial, meaning that when they're born, they leave the nest and they run around, follow their parents, and they kind of feed on their own, but their parents protect them, which is compared to a altricial bird, which just stays in the nest until it's basically full size,
like
and then it flies out of the nest. Exactly. So these baby birds have wings, but their wings when they're babies are really small and they don't have flight feathers, right? If you've like seen a baby duck, you know what I'm talking about, right? So these scientists basically looked at how these baby birds use their wings as they develop towards the wing going from a baby wing to a functional adult wing. Right? So they showed that these babies, so these wings are not capable of flight, but they still have function, right? So what is the function? So they took these baby birds and they would like chase them up inclines of increasing steepness, right? And they found that as the birds, like once you reach like a 30-degree incline, I forget exactly what it is, but like once you reach a certain incline, they start flapping their wings to help them get traction as they run up this slope. And they can even flap their wings to the point that they can run up like 100-degree slope. So like, you know, like going upside down, basically, like it's crazy. And so the first version of the ontogenetic transitional wing hypothesis was actually called wing assisted incline running, because this is the first thing they realized. You could chase these guys up these inclines and they use their wings. But the stroke they used was slightly different than like an actual powered flight stroke. So this, you know, could represent possibly what the evolutionary precursor to the flight stroke was in non-avian dinosaurs, right? But then they went further with this hypothesis and they took these baby birds and they dropped them. And they found that if they dropped them, as they were falling, they would still use their wings, you know? So basically this is like ground up is running up the slopes and flapping your wings, and the trees down is like being dropped from a tree and being like, flapping your wings to like slow your descent. And they showed that these proto wings had function, you know, like so they're functional even though they can't be used for flight. So this created, you know, an idea of what the proto wing stroke might have been for. And then what's really interesting is, you know, as these birds develop ontogenetically and become more and more mature, they start to have longer feathers on their wings, the same as we see evolving in non-avian dinosaurs, going from small feathers to larger feathers. They also like when they're babies, they don't have an ossified sternum, and the breast muscle is very small. But as they become adults, the sternum ossifies, it becomes really large, the breast muscles become really large. So again, this is mirroring the evolutionary changes from a non-avian dinosaur to a bird. And so, I mean, this is like an idea that's very old, right? That ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. So this is basically applying that.
The growth from baby to adult mimics the evolutionary change from let's say a non-flying dinosaur to an avian dinosaur.
That's the hypothesis.
Yeah, right.
I mean, all we can really say right now is it is a hypothesis that is supported by the fossil data.
Wow.
That we have available.
Jingmai, I'm just kind of picturing, you know, going into the old chicken coop and kind of chasing the chickens around. They start to flap to get away, but then that led to you. You were part of that group that actually strapped little wings to an ostrich and ran them around to see if they could get a little lift?
So I will not claim that I came up with that idea. That was all these crazy engineers. And so we were approached at the IVPP by a group of scientists from Tsinghua University. And there's actually a lot of engineers who study living animals as a way to improve flying machines. So, you know, they study hummingbirds to figure out how they can make drones work better, things like that. So they wanted to study extinct flying animals as a way to help make better flying contraptions. I mean, I can understand it, but it's a bit of a stretch because
it makes sense because for nature to have developed flight and powered flight with very little fuel. It takes very little fuel. I mean, obviously the needs of powered flight are great for an organism, but way less than the amount of gallons you need in aviation fuel to get a Cessna off the ground.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like powered flight is the most physically demanding form of locomotion utilized by any animal. And a hummingbird has to feed like every 4 hours or it dies because it needs so much energy. So I actually don't really know if you would like convert the energy of a hummingbird per grams of its weight and compare that to the, you know, fuel used by Cessna. Like, I actually really don't know how the comparison would break down. I do know that human forms of locomotion are extremely primitive, like especially space travel. I mean, all we're doing is basically strapping ourselves to a bunch of dynamite and exploding ourselves into space. It's like,
So what happened with the experiment? Did the ostrich show any kind of lift?
First of all, the hypothesis okay, let me back up. Sorry. So Caudipteryx is the most primitive dinosaur with proto wings on its forelimbs. And if you look at this animal, it's got like big old chunky legs and short forelimbs and it has these wings on them. So based on these proportions, we assume that Caudipteryx was not capable of flight. But it's never been actually proven quantitatively, right? So one thing from this experiment is that it proved without a doubt that Caudipteryx was definitely not volant. It was not capable of any form of flight. But it did also show that, yes, these small wings did have incipient aerodynamic qualities. So, for example, if the wings are held out to the side while it's running, it maintains a greater balance. So it makes it easier to maintain your balance, I guess is a better way of saying it. It's also was shown that moving the wings during maneuvers, like turning, could also be advantageous to like tuck one wing in and, that kind of thing. So it showed that for bipedal locomotion, having proto wings is advantageous for locomotion, which would then, then natural selection would select for larger wings. So it did support that hypothesis that a bipedal animal with proto wings that natural selection might enlarge those wings because there are aerodynamic properties that are advantageous to bipedal locomotion.
Right.
Does that make
yeah,
sense?
and also the ability to escape predation.
Yeah, I mean, if you can run faster and also you maintain balance easier, which means you're losing less energy as you run, these are all things that are advantageous. But honestly, I think that the reason feathers first appeared on the forelimbs in this elaborated morphology, because you go from an animal like covered in dino fuzz, right? Something like Sinosauropteryx or even maybe like relatives of T-Rex. They have these feathers that are actually more like hair. They're proto feathers that consist of single filaments. And then you eventually see the appearance of more complex feather morphologies, like the type of feather we see in a living bird is called a pennaceous feather. So this feather, the appearance of this feather in the fossil record coincides with the appearance of this feather being used in an arrangement on the forelimb in a wing-like arrangement. So like a proto-wing. So
but not a flying wing, but a proto wing. What's that feather called? It's got a spine in the middle, and it has the.
So it's called a pennaceous feather, and
why?
So the spine.
Why?
I don't know. I think pennaceous has something to do. Okay, that's a very good question. I'm embarrassed. I don't know, but there must be
audacious pennaceous.
Yeah,
I like it.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
But so we actually call all dinosaurs that have those feathers. They form a monophyletic group, and we call that Pennyraptora, because it's like Maniraptoran dinosaurs with pennaceous feathers. And the most primitive member of this group is Oviraptorosaurs, and they have already little proto wings. So Caudipteryx that I was just talking about is a basal Oviraptorosaur. So, why did the wing arrangement first evolve and then get exapted for flight?
But wait, when was the first proto feather, like the little fuzz, found in the fossil record? And then when was the first pennaceous feather found?
The first one was found in a small theropod dinosaur from China in 1996, I believe. That was when it was Sinosauropteryx or Sinoornithosaurus. I'm sorry, I always get the two confused.
Is that the J-hole biota?
Yes, this is from the J-hole biota. So, and then it's mostly from the J-hole that all these other feathered dinosaurs have been found. There's actually only one or two other feathered dinosaur specimens that are from outside of China. I know there's like one in Canada, and I think there's one that was recently published somewhere else, but I'm not sure.
Archaeopteryx from Germany.
Sorry, yeah, touche, you got me there. But I'm talking about non-avian dinosaurs.
Right. And what time frame was the J-hole with the two biotas in China?
So the J-hole biota, the J-hole biota was like 135 to 120 million years ago, but birds don't appear
That's early Cretaceous?
And also, early Cretaceous. And birds and feathered dinosaurs don't appear towards like about 130 for the oldest birds anyways, and I think for dinosaurs, they don't appear to like 125. Obviously, they were there. We just don't have them in the fossil record. And then there's an older biota that's found in almost the same region that's called the Yanliao biota, also called the Daohugo biota. And it was about 166 to 161 million years old.
That's Middle Jurassic, right?
Yeah, so the animals from the Yanliao biota are older than Archaeopteryx, and it includes the Scansoriopterigids, which are not closely related at all. And it also includes Anchiornis, which is a troodontid-like dinosaur that is probably very, very closely related to Archaeopteryx, but also probably couldn't fly. So this provides like the perfect, evidence in the fossil record that there were small feathered dinosaurs around before Archaeopteryx. Because before, when people were in the 1960s, for example, or 1970s, saying that birds evolved from small bipedal theropod dinosaurs, we didn't have any small bipedal theropod dinosaurs that were older than Archaeopteryx. So this was called the temporal paradox. People said, oh, birds can't be related to these guys because we don't have them in the fossil record, before birds. But now, because of the Yanmao biota, we have all these animals that provide perfect, examples for what the closest non-avian dinosaur relative might have been.
I see if I could jump in for a second. I've heard that argument before from some of my bird friends that, wait, they can't be related to raptors because raptors don't really show up until the late Cretaceous. And here you're saying birds, when we got Archaeopteryx back in the Jurassic, there was the the time thing. You're saying that with creatures that have been found in China, that we have those early raptors now, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's no longer a temporal paradox. Like, that's been eliminated.
The temporal paradox. I like that.
Wait, is that from Star Trek?
I wouldn't know. I'm a Star Wars fan. Sorry.
Sorry, Dave.
So actually, have you been able to you have been to China to see the collections. Do you go out to the field and pry up the rocks and find bird dinosaur fossils yourself?
So I have been in the field a bunch, but when I first showed up at the IVPP in the fall of 2009, they had just finished their summer field work, and they go out to the Liaoning area where where the Zhehe biota and the Yanmao biota are both come from, and they spend like 40 days there, and they work like 10 hours a day just sitting in a quarry, just splitting slabs. And they were like, yeah, next summer you'll come with us. And I was like, that sounds awful. But, I understand that as a paleontologist, I need to do this. I need to experience it,
This is in
right?
Mongolia, right?
No, this is to the east of Inner Mongolia, actually. So you know how China is a chicken, this on a map, and the beak is Korea? So it's kind of like, and then there's like the gobble thing that comes down. So like the gobble thing is part of Liaoning province, where the Zhehe, yeah. So I actually have never done field work in Liaoning. I mean, I've gone to visit the fossil sites, and I've, picked around in the talus and found some insects and plant material, but I've never done proper field work. But there's one other locality, early Cretaceous locality in China, that's produced a large number of fossil birds. And actually, the first ever Mesozoic bird from China comes from this locality. So this is the Xiago Formation in Gansu province. So this is way out in the west. It's actually very cool. The locality is very close to the westernmost extent of the Great Wall of China. So I got to see what the Great Wall looks like in the middle of the desert. Interesting fact, the Great Wall is really short out there because it only has to be high enough to keep the sheep from moving forward. Because in the desert, the Mongolians have to travel with a food source. So they would travel with flocks of sheep. And if there's this little wall that the sheep can't get over, that stops the army.
Well, I have a question about all these biotas. So there's incredible preservation of birds and avian dinosaurs. What other animals were found that had the same exquisite preservation? They must have found other things, insects and soft-bodied impressions.
So the Zhehe biota had, the first feathered dinosaur was found in 1996, and the first bird was found in 1992, actually by my boss, Zhou Zhonghe. But before that, for 80 years, maybe even longer, the Zhehe biota had been really important to fish paleontologists and also paleontologists studying insects and plants and other things like that. So my current boss, Zhou Zhonghe, was with Zhang Miman, who's a very, very famous Chinese fish paleontologist. And they're doing field work in Liaoning, and because he's going to do his master's with her and study fish, and he finds the first bird. And Miman is just like, this is really important. Don't study fish. I'm not going to hold you to an agreement to work with me. Go off and study these birds, because this is important. At the same time, a farmer finds another bird that's almost exactly the same, and Paul Sereno ends up studying it. But then with the discovery of feathered dinosaurs 4 years later, it just kicked off this huge, flurry of activity in this area because the feathered dinosaur was found by a farmer also, and he was able to sell it and make some money. So then all these farmers started to look for fossils. And I mean, that's why there's thousands of fossils that have been found from this area, thousands of exquisite fossils, because if you had to rely only on paleontologists, I mean, there would still be
There's
hundreds
a
of exquisite
financial
fossils,
incentive.
but there wouldn't, yeah. I mean, there's crazy stories about it. Like, you know, there's stories of like a farmer who sold a fossil and then drunk himself to death with Chinese spirits with baijiu. Like that day, I was just so excited. And it's actually illegal. So right now there's a lot of farmers in jail for collecting because they're trying to stop it for whatever reason. I don't really understand
So these
why.
biotas, are they ancient lake sediments like Kemmer or Wyoming?
Yeah, they're what we call volcanolacustrine deposits. So it's lakes, like the fossils are mostly in lake deposits, but it's punctuated with volcanic activity. So every once in a while you have like a massive mortality event.
So these are freshwater.
It's freshwater. And so the cool thing about lakes is lakes are considered what we call a taphonomic window for preserving really delicate fossils. So, and birds are very delicate fossils because aerodynamic pressures limit their body size. So they're not very big compared to other dinosaurs. And also their bones are hollow because that helps reduce body mass and is more advantageous for flight. So birds are extremely rare in the fossil record, except in these types of lacustrine deposits. Like, for example, you know, the Green River Formation and, in North America, which also has all these exceptionally preserved fossils. So the reason lakes are such great places to preserve delicate fossils is because the bottom of the lake is usually anoxic.
Without oxygen.
Yeah, so there's no scavengers living there that can like destroy the fossil. Instead, there's things like biofilms or anaerobic bacteria that are actually good for preserving fossils and especially good for preserving soft tissues, which is why we also get things like lungs and feathers and other cool traces preserved in these specimens. Exactly. And the other thing about lakes is that lakes are fed by rivers. So rivers have a lot of energy and they're carrying sediment. But as soon as they reach a lake, which has low energy, basically no energy, right? The water entering the lake loses its energy and drops its sediment load. So this means that there's constant deposition in a lake. So you fall into a lake and sink to the bottom. Not only are you not likely to be scavenged, but you will surely be buried because of the constant sedimentation rate.
It's always there.
Right?
Oh,
exactly.
Awesome.
So really fast, just wanted to talk about other things that have been found in the Jehol biota. So we have feathered dinosaurs like Caudipteryx, a whole diversity of birds. We have lots of aquatic reptiles, like little tiny freshwater, like plesiosaur-like things. They're not related to plesiosaurs, but that's what they look like. There's Caecosaurus, exactly. Yeah. And
I own one.
Yeah, I have one too. And I like a Hylaphsaurus, things like that.
I don't have one.
Of course, there's also mammals that preserve their hair and all, and yeah, very cool with soft tissues. There's
Cretaceous mammals?
Yeah, early Cretaceous mammals. Yeah, and also, you've heard about the Cretaceous mammal that was feeding on dinosaurs? That's also from the Jehol, like Rapenomamus. Yeah, so I mean, it's not that big. It's like the size of a raccoon, but it had some baby Psittacosaur remains preserved in its stomach.
Psittacosaurus, we know how to say that now. I do. Psittacosaurus. You've talked about dinosaurs evolving flight 3, 4, 5 times. What group of dinosaurs did actually give rise to birds? And then let's maybe discuss that one really weird group that's got the membranous wings. You know it, you love it. But where do birds come from in the dinosaur lineage?
So I would say, I mean, we don't know for sure, but I would say that birds are nested within troodontids and within a particular group of troodontids called the Anchiornithiforms.
Define troodonti.
So, that's hard. Honestly, I'm not.
They were bipedal velociraptors.
Wrong again, Dave.
No, so Velociraptor is a dromaeosaurid rather, sorry. So Dromaeosauridae and Troodontidae together form a group called Deinonychosauria, and they're then sister taxon to Oviraptorosauria, which together forms Peniraptora, all the dinosaurs with pennaceous feathers. So troodontids are very similar to dromaeosaurs, but with some pretty important morphological differences. One major difference is that no troodontid has an ossified sternum, just like Archaeopteryx. Now, it's also, this is a little controversial, but it's very possible that what we call aves, like, all these stem birds, Some people say aviale, and I say boo. But it could be that what we call aves is actually paraphyletic. The evidence just can't
Wait, what does paraphyletic mean?
Basically, it means that it's multiple independent origins of a bird-like form that then we think forms a natural group, but it doesn't. So, for example, like if you think about modern paleognath birds, there's a group called the ratites, right? And they're all these flightless paleognath birds, like emus, cassowary, ostriches. So we call them this group called ratites. But actually, loss of flight evolved independently in all these different flightless birds, so they don't form a true monophyletic group. I mean, in the bigger picture, they're all paleognaths. So they are if you said they're all paleognaths, that's monophyletic. That is a true group.
Wait,
but if you take...
Was it ostrich? Did it have flight and then lose it?
Yes, the paleognath birds that we know of in the Paleocene, like 50 million years ago, 55 million years ago, we can tell from their skeletons that they were totally volant. They were flying birds.
Ah, a new word of the day, volant, which means engaged in or having the power of flight, which is kind of the opposite of the word I just learned earlier, which is cursorial, meaning the ground runners.
The earliest bird was volant. So any bird that doesn't fly has secondarily lost its flight. And it's just a coincidence that all the paleognaths that are still alive are all flightless. I mean, well, tinamous can fly, and tinamous have very different morphologies.
Never heard of a
than
tinamou.
the flightless. A tinamou, yeah, they're in like South America, and they kind of just look like quails, I guess.
So, Jingmai, this idea that troodontids, do you say troodont or troodont?
Troodont?
Troodont. All right,
yeah.
troodontids. Troodontids, is that controversial, the idea that birds are coming right from there? Is this a theory of yours, or?
Right now, the only way we have of saying how animals are related is to do a cladistic analysis.
Right.
And a cladistic analysis means that you basically take the entire morphology of an animal and you reduce it to numerical code. And then you do that for all these other animals. And then you have these fancy algorithms that like takes the morphology that's now numbers and tries to relate it to each other depending on what algorithm you choose. So I usually choose parsimony. So that's the idea that a feature is most likely to evolve once. And then if you have a feature in 10 animals, it most likely evolved in their common ancestor and was inherited by them versus them all evolving the feature independently.
Wait, name 10 things of a bird you would turn into numbers.
My current matrix that I have yet to publish that tells me that birds are troodontids, which is why, I've been talking about it for a while.
Okay,
It's a massive project, which is why I haven't published yet, but it's 1,000 characters roughly.
Wow.
And I mean, so, just for premaxillary teeth, you have like 30 characters, like the premaxillary teeth, are they all the same? Where are they located in the premaxilla? Like, what do the serrations look like? Are they, whatever. It's a million different characters. So you would basically say like, premaxilla, unfused, 0. Fused only proximally, 1. Fused throughout its entirety, 2. And then that's one character.
You're basically assigning digital to analog data.
Yeah.
And this is something that blew me away. No extant, which means current existing birds, have teeth.
Yeah. And that's because the clade of birds that survived was toothless. I mean, in the Cretaceous, you had all these birds, and tooth loss, a beak evolved like 20 times. I don't know how many times it evolved, but it evolved many times, both within birds and among non-avian dinosaurs. For example, like, a very derived oviraptorosaurs all have beaks. And, psittacosaurs have beaks.
And no teeth?
Yeah, and no teeth. And there were birds, though, that had beaks and teeth. There would be teeth in the back and a beak in the front kind of thing. And I mean, all sorts of different combinations because tooth loss evolves so many times.
Well, if you've ever seen a parrot bite a carrot, you realize you don't need teeth to chop your finger off.
Owie.
Yeah. Well, parrots have like crazy, highly modified skulls. There were unfortunately no Cretaceous parrots. We don't see that level of diversity. But yeah, I mean, actually most of these birds had very...
a dinosaur.
Yeah, we have a lot of parrots here in Pasadena, as you probably know. But anyways, okay, so let's talk about why do I think birds are troodontids. There's, both morphological information, like I said, for example, the shared absence of a ossified sternum in Archaeopteryx and Sapiornis and in all troodontids. But then again, you have all these other birds with ossified sterna. Dromaeosaurs have ossified sterna, so...
That means the sternum is 2 bones that joins together?
Yeah, so, in dromaeosaurids and most dinosaurs, they have 2 plates. And then in early birds, these two plates fuse into one plate. And then eventually there evolves like this downward projecting structure called a keel.
A keel on a boat.
Exactly. And that keel separates the two giant breast muscles. And like this expansion of the sternum and the development of the keel is basically to increase the surface area available for these flight muscles, which became very large as animals first evolved flight and then also evolved to be better at flying, right? Because the earliest bird probably wasn't very good at flying, and it didn't fly anything like a living bird because it lacked all these skeletal modifications. But these slowly accrued over, the first 80 million years of avian evolution. And then then you have the big KT extinction, and only one group of birds survives. And this is called Neornithes. And it's basically crown birds. All birds are members of this group, and the members that survive, none of them had teeth, so all their relatives don't have teeth. Because like teeth is one of those things that like I think it's called Dolo's law, that like some features once lost can't be regained.
I see.
And they say teeth might be one of these features. I mean, that's at least what I remember being taught when I was studying paleontology. It was a long time ago. I haven't looked into the updated theory on that. But there's also a lot of behavioral evidence, fossilized behavior that links birds with troodontids. For example, Anchiornis was able to egest pellets. It's the only dinosaur we know of that had this behavior, which we also see.
The digestion was bidirectional.
Yes, exactly. So like everybody's dissected an owl pellet. That's what I'm talking about. Like, when birds egest things or like barf up things that that are more difficult for them to digest. Whereas other dinosaurs like T-Rex and apparently also Microraptor, which is another flying dinosaur, it's a flying dromaeosaurid, the food just stayed in their stomach forever, for a long time. And went out the other end. So this is like, and also there's a really famous dinosaur specimen that's really beautiful, also from Liaoning, and it's called Mei Long, which means sleeping dragon. And it was killed in a pyroclastic flow. That was the word I was looking for earlier. But so, it's just like a flow of hot ash just came and just killed it instantaneously while it was sleeping. And it's sleeping like a duck sleeps, with its like head tucked underneath its wing. So again, these are like
beautiful
behavioral evidences that link these two groups together, in addition to the skeletal evidence that we also see. So my vote is for troodontids, but it's definitely something that hasn't been worked out. Like there was a paper that came out this week in Current Biology, and they did their big analysis, which is still much smaller than mine. And they said that, birds evolve also from Anchiornis, but they say Anchiornis is not a troodontid.
So what came before troodontid? What is totally unlike any bird or avian dinosaur?
Well, I guess then you have to move back outside of Peniraptora. Once you get into Peniraptora and you have all these small dinosaurs with feathers.
I mean, before feathers. What were they before there were even proto-feathers?
Well, then you look at primitive clades of theropods like Compsognathus or like, pre-Silurisaurian theropod dinosaurs. So it's somewhere within this group Theropoda, which we know because obviously
theropods are 3 toes and bipedal.
4 toes, yeah. 3 weight-bearing toes. Because of course in birds, that 4th toe that's not weight-bearing reverses itself and becomes the halix, which then allows birds to perch, to grip things. But of course, this adaptation was absent in the earliest birds. It was absent in Archaeopteryx and some other primitive taxa that haven't been fully described yet.
The thumb was absent? Or the rear toe?
No, it wasn't reversed.
Right,
it was present, but it was just kind of sticking off to the side, the same way as it does, in other.
So wait, theropod has
dinosaurs.
4 toes, but 3 are weight bearing. That's why theropod sounds like 3.
I haven't heard that. Okay, Ray, what's your question?
Yeah, Ray, you want to explain that for me?
Okay, I'm half right. Theropoda comes from Greek, meaning wild beast, and theropods are a clade of dinosaurs characterized by hollow bones and 3-toed limbs.
We're way deep into the bushes here, and that's what I really appreciate now. I mean, having seen this revolution in our thinking about dinosaurs and this argument with birds and dinosaurs, the farther back you go, the more complex and just fascinating this tree is. And there's so many ways. I'm just wondering how, instead of going before troodontids, how the birds come out of the troodontids. Does that happen in the Cretaceous? Or does that happen back earlier? That's
Jurassic.
In the Jurassic.
So imagine imagine, ignore all the rest of the dinosaur tree. We're now only looking at Troodontidae. So like right here is a node, Troodontidae. And here you have your basal Troodontids and you have blah, blah, blah. And then one lineage of Troodontids that's like Anchiornis then like splits into birds. Okay. Like that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then like, because Archaeopteryx and Anchiornis are so similar. There's just one major difference, and that the feathers in Anchiornis are not asymmetrical. And also the wings are smaller, a little bit smaller. And it also has like proto wings on its hind limbs, but it seems that in the avian lineage of dinosaur flight, the hind limb feathers became shorter and reduced, whereas only in the Dromaeosaur Microraptor lineage that also evolved flight independently, these feathers on the hind legs became elaborated, and then to the point that they also became aerodynamic features. But we do know that, the animal that all these flying dinosaurs evolved from had feathers, long feathers on its hind legs. Yeah. And then you have one lineage of Troodontids becoming volant birds, possibly, right? And then you also have this other bizarre lineage that we don't really know how it fits into the tree called the Scansoriopterigidae. And it was actually the Scansoriopterigidae that made us realize that flight evolved multiple times within the Dinosauria. So the first Scansoriopterigids that were described was in 2002. And the earliest, there's only like 5 or 6 specimens that are known to date. And the first 2 that were described were babies or juveniles, early juveniles. Because they're juveniles, their skeleton isn't fully ossified. There's features that aren't preserved. But what you could see is that they had one digit on their hand that was hyper elongated. Yeah. And, when we try to understand what a fossil animal is doing, we of course look for extant analogs, for modern analogs. So if you look at the, living animal kingdom, the only animal with one hyper elongate digit on its hand is the eye. So in the first paper on Scansoriopterigids, they were like,
wait, what's an eye? Is it a bird or bat?
An eye, it's a primate, a weird looking like primate with really
lemur type thing.
It kind of looks like a lemur, and it has one really long finger that it uses for like inserting into rotting tree bark or tree trunks and probing out grubs. But what people also don't tell you is that it has super powerful jaws that it used to bite open the wood, and then it probes its finger in there. So like you kind of need both morphologies if you're going to have a similar ecological niche, right? And people weren't thinking about that when they suggested that Epidexipteryx was also like an eye, because obviously like most of these guys don't have very powerful jaw muscles. Anyways, okay, so they thought it was like an eye. They put that out there as a possible hypothesis for like that maybe this elongate digit was a feeding adaptation. And then, like in 2015, we found a more complete, more ontogenetically mature specimen. So an older specimen, right? Like a adult, subadult. And, it preserved not only this elongate digit, but also this bone sticking out of the wrist, and also soft tissue remnants of a membrane. So when you have a more complete specimen, scientists realized that elongate digit was not a feeding adaptation, but actually more similar to the elongate digits of a bat or a pterosaur, and it was used to support a membranous wing. And the thing is, like, if you look at Microraptor, Rahonavis birds, they all fly with wings formed out of feathers, be it only on their forelimbs or on the forelimbs and hind limbs, but they have wings. The aerofoil is a soft tissue structure formed by a feather, right? But if you look at Scansoriopterigids, their wings are soft tissue structure formed by a membrane, not out of feathers. So it's much more like a bat or a pterosaur or flying squirrel. Did they die out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were very short-lived. Right. We only know of them in the Yanglao biota. They were a brief experimentation with flight.
I gotta say, Jingmai is one of the craziest looking beasties. It's got that bone coming out of its wrist, and it's got sort of pterosaur kind of wing flaps, and it looks like something from Game of Thrones or something. And I know that you've worked with artists, have you not, in bringing some of these beasts back to life, and you tell them.
Yes, of course. There's an artist, I didn't work with her, but I found her illustration of Scansoriopterigids online. Her name is Emily Willoughby.
I saw that.
I love her, interpretation of Ichi. It is terrifying. Like it looks, like you do not want to meet this animal, in the night.
It is badass looking. Yeah.
Well, speaking of weird beasties, what is the coolest fossil you've ever found or seen, or in all your roaming through the collections of the museums? What is your moment, your crazy fossil moment?
Everything excites me. That's just my personality. But, you have to go back really far to feel that first excitement. And, I remember being in the field in Inner Mongolia when I was still an undergrad. And it was this really rich fossil locality. I mean, it's like Miocene, so boring. But, we're finding all these mammal fossils everywhere. Sorry, I'm kidding.
I love the Miocene.
I'm totally an ageist. I'm like, if it's not at least 60 million years old, I don't care. But it also makes it hard to relate to humans because they're 100 years so long. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Anyways, I found this tooth. And, at the time, we're in this big group of mammal, paleontologists, and nobody knew what the animal was, what that tooth belonged to. So I thought that was really cool. That's kind of a fun feeling to have possibly found something that's totally new.
What was the tooth? What was it?
I never found out.
Xingmai, if you could get in the deep time machine and go back in time, where would you go? When would you go? What time period would you go to?
And where?
When and where? But what would you like to see when you time traveled back? What would you like to look at?
I think I would go to the Ediacaran fauna in Australia, 500, 600 million years ago, because these animals, these soft-bodied animals, it's difficult enough to figure out what an animal looked like when you have its skeleton, but, with these soft tissue fossils, these are before vertebrate life exploded on Earth. Yeah, and they're these big, weird, some of them are big, some of them small. There's a lot of weird animals, and just these faint soft tissue traces to try to understand what these animals were doing. It's really difficult. And so I would love to see what the Ediacaran fauna looked like when it was alive. I also love beaches, and they were in the ocean near shore. So that would have been cool. And also I have a fascination with seeing the moon when it was close to the Earth, because we know that ever since the moon has formed, it has been moving farther and farther away from Earth.
1.5 centimeters a year.
Yeah, can you imagine when the moon was just boom, right there in the sky, and the tides would have been crazy,
Wow.
that would be my first choice. Of course, there's a million things I would love to see, but that's what first jumps out to me. I love the moon.
Well, I'm surprised at that, but it's a beautiful thought, thinking about that giant moon and those weird animals. I would have thought you would have gone to the Jurassic of China, but that's interesting.
Yeah, like I said, I study what I study, but I love all ancient life, it's got my trilobite tattoo to prove it. I'm not one of the snotty.
Yeah, I got mine.
Both you guys have trilobite tattoos. All right, so I've got a question here. So science is under attack. And because of social media and because of certain factions on the planet today, opinion is being touted as fact, and science is being pushed under the rug. What can you, as an educator and a paleontologist, to help change people's opinion that science is something that's obviously verifiable, but that opinion, especially opinion on social media, is not fact and something to be taken with a grain of salt or questioned?
So, well, I know what not to do, and that's not to get really drunk with your colleagues when you're in the field in South Africa and then go yell at these assholes online. That's definitely not what you should do. I've learned my lesson. Okay, I would basically say that there's no hope for any adult who's already just dead set on their opinion. The only thing we can do is change future generations. There's nothing you can do about these crotchety people who are just their mind is made up. So it's really about getting people interested in science when they're young, so that they look at the world in a different way, so that they're thinking in a different way. They're applying the scientific process to everything that they hear and they see. So, I think the best thing to do is just stay out of it, because it's a very volatile place. Scientists are being really, it's a very dangerous place for scientists. I know lots of scientists who have lost their careers because of the internet mob. And so I think think, it's
But
really
that's awesome.
not-
That's awesome. Get them while they're young.
And also we need to change the perception of what a scientist is, because right now people think of scientists as like boring people who don't have fun, and the fact is that scientists, I would say, have one of the best careers that's out there. It's an exciting job. You're constantly being challenged. Things are always new, so you never get bored. There's tons of opportunity for travel. You can work all over the world. But right now, there's this perception. Everybody wants to be cool. Everybody wants to be pretty, and people think that these things can't, that they're exclusive, right? But they don't have to be. We can show that you can be a girly girl who puts on all her makeup and wears heels, and you can still be a badass scientist, like you can be whatever you want to be, and still, and science doesn't have to be separate from that. We're going to go extinct, and in 5 million years, the Earth's not even going to remember us or care at all. So, in the grand big picture, it doesn't matter.
Life finds a way. Life will survive us.
Life finds a way.
Well, Jingmai, awesome. Thank you so much for being a paleo nerd and on our show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really a fun and lively chat with you guys.
Jingmai, I learned so much today, and thank you for helping us, sort through feathered dinosaurs. And I'm just blown away by your work and what you're doing. You're a role model for a lot of people.
And you're going to have an amazing time in Chicago. What an incredible museum that is.
Yeah, come and visit me. I'll give you the Sue behind-the-scenes tour.
Cool. We'll be there.
Good luck, and thank you, Jingmai. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Wow, there are so many names of birds and velociraptors.
Birds and raptors and dinosaurs.
I really lost my place there at times, Ray.
So did I, Dave.
We're going to have links to the Anchiornis and the ornithophids. We got to have links to
ornithomimids. Yeah. But, that's just the amazing thing with all these guests as we go back further into the evolutionary trees, how bushy those trees are.
Yeah.
And that's, dinosaurs taking flight 3, 4, 5 times. And there's the one lineage that came out of that.
Is that called convergent evolution?
Yeah, well, convergent evolution is a different concept where different unrelated animals start assuming the same form. They just fill that niche and they converge in the same form.
Oh, the same form. So what is it when animals independently evolve into a niche? For example, this dinosaur develops flight and this totally unrelated dinosaur develops flight.
That is convergent evolution, different animals filling that same niche, and then they have kind of a very similar look to them. But we're talking about an evolutionary radiation where all these animals are splitting off and they're closely related, and the experts are the ones that really argue about this nub or that nub. And they do cladistic analysis, which is basically mathematical equations to see all the characteristics. And she's talking about some of those characteristics having like 1,000 points on them with the data, but
that was mind-blowing because you're actually using hard algorithms and data to compare species and families of Mesozoic birds.
Yeah, and you know what really kind of blew me away? Jingmai was just a lot of fun to talk to. She's young, she's vivacious, and she has got Rainer Zangerl's job at the Field Museum as the curator of fossil vertebrates. And this is an old fellow that he's near and dear to me, man.
Remind me, he's the guy that was kind of the start of the buzzsaw?
Yes.
Helicoprion?
Yeah. So it all comes around, man. It was just like a beautiful story. Like, what's your job? Wait, that's Reiner's job. I actually wrote like a memorial to Rainer when he passed away at age 93. And what a sweet guy he was. He took me under his wing. He taught me all kinds of things. Very patient with me.
Get it? Took you
I get it.
We've heard a lot about wings.
Yeah.
How many different... This is what's just so crazy. I mean, she mentioned all these names of birds and fossils that just went right over my head because the names are complicated to even pronounce. 10 syllables, but they all have Latin roots and Latin derivatives.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you paleontologists remember all these words?
Well, I'm a pseudo-paleontologist. I'm not one, but to wrap your head around these names, it's kind of fun. scientific names are that there's only one name given to a specific creature, right? And there are so many common names. So when you say red snapper, that means something it's a completely different fish in the Atlantic than what we think of here in Alaska.
Yeah, but that's not a scientific name.
I know, I'm just saying, that's the beauty of a scientific name is it's a dead language that's not changing.
Right.
So the language is done, It's not
Right.
morphing like the English language, all living languages are.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no.
What?
Everybody's saying yeah, no now. Yeah, no.
What's that?
It's an expression that has creeped into the English language. It's a dichotomy. People are saying, yeah, no, I was doing this or doing that. Even newscasters are heard saying it.
Huh.
Remember when bad meant good and good meant bad?
Yeah, actually, the thing that throws me with the kids when they say, that's really sick. It's like, that's a good thing?
Well, that's been around for quite some time. That's really
Yeah,
sick.
I'm showing my boomerage.
Yeah, no.
My boomerage.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. But hey, talking to Jingmai gives me hope for the future. She's really bringing some fresh thinking.
And I think she had the best response to any guest we've had so far when I asked the question, how do we promote science and challenge opinion over fact? She said, the only thing you can do is get them while they're young and impressionable and they're learning. And that is such an awesome answer.
Yeah. Well, that's hope for the future there. Yeah, the next generation. Yeah.
Let's end on an up note.
Well, the birds are flying out there in the sky, and there's so many of them, and we can say with confidence that they are dinosaurs, and dinosaurs live, my friend. And that is so cool.
So they're not rat with wings?
Well, they are reptiles with wings, and yeah, they're reptiles. They're flying. They're dinosaurs, man, so that's cool.
That is cool. All right, Ray, I will talk to you next week. That was awesome.
Always fun shooting the breeze with you, David.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Paleo Nerds. Make sure to like and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you're listening. If you want to learn more about what you heard today, check out our website, paleonerds.com. You'll find tons of pictures and links, including photographic evidence that today's guests and your hosts have been Paleo Nerds for a long, long time. Again, that's paleonerds.com. Thanks for listening.
I'm a paleo nerd. I'm a paleo nerd. I'm a paleo nerd. Don't you understand? I'm a paleo